Welcome to this session. I'm Teacher Peter. I'm still taking you through the session of science. We're still looking at light energy. And you remember in our previous session, we looked at several things in light energy. So let's begin with the corrections for the work we had. Our first question was saying, what is a ray? You can say a ray is a path taken by light in a particular direction. Then the second question was saying, write down any one property of light you know. You can say light travels in a straight line, and also light forms a shadow when it's obstructed. Then number 3 was saying, write down one example of a transparent object. You can write air. You can also write clear glass and clear water. Then number 4 was saying, what is a beam of light? You can say a beam of light is a group of light rays. Then number 5 was saying, write down any one type of beam you know. We have the parallel beams, we have the diverging beams, and then the converging beams. Then number 6 was saying, what happens when light is obstructed? When light is obstructed, it forms a shadow. Then number 7, write an example to prove that light travels faster than sound. An example to prove that light travels faster than sound, you can write and say, we always see lightning before hearing thunder. We always see lightning before hearing thunder when it is threatening to rain. Number 8, define the following terms. Opaque objects. You remember I didn't teach you about opaque objects, but the definition is opaque objects are objects that don't allow light to pass through them. Then translucent objects are objects which allow little light to pass through them. Then transparent objects are objects that allow all the light to pass through them. Then number 9 was saying materials that allow light to pass through them are called, these are transparent. Materials that allow little light to pass through them are translucent. So the answer for number 9 is translucent objects, objects that allow little light to pass through them. Then number 10 was saying, write down an example of an artificial source of light. You can write candle, lanterns. Those are examples of artificial sources of light. Now let's come to today's lesson. In today's lesson, I want us to look at opaque objects. And our first question says, what are opaque objects? I want you to look at this diagram here. This diagram here is showing us a board right here. You can see this is a board. Then somebody is flashing light towards the board. Can you observe what is formed right here? What is formed right here is a shadow. Yes, so we said that opaque objects are objects that don't allow light to pass through them. Just like you can see the light is striking on the board and it cannot pass through the opaque object. Why do you think so? It's because light travels in a straight line. Light cannot bend. So if light strikes an opaque object, it just has to form a shadow because it cannot bend or bypass the opaque object. So what it will do, it will form a shadow. So what are opaque objects? The answer is, these are objects which don't allow light to pass through them, and even us, we can't see through them. Are we together? So you can't see through an opaque object. Take an example of a wall. A wall is an opaque object. You can't see through the wall. So even light can't pass through the wall. So when you're asked what are opaque objects, answer and say, these are objects which don't allow light to pass through them. Then note this, we cannot see through them because light travels in a straight line. So opaque objects instead cast shadows. So opaque objects will always cast shadows just because they can't allow light to pass through them. Let's look at examples of opaque objects. One of the examples is wood. Wood is an example of an opaque object. Then metals are also opaque objects. Then human body, your body is an opaque object. It can't allow light to pass through stones are also opaque, blackboards are also opaque, walls are opaque. Let's look at the advantages of opaque objects. Why would we need opaque objects in our daily life? Shadows formed by opaque objects provide people with shade or shelter. So have you ever sat under a tree? Yeah, you feel better when you sit under shade. So opaque objects form shadows. During a sunny day, you would wish to sit under a shade. So a shade is formed because light is striking on an opaque object. So a shadow is formed for you to sit comfortably. So one of the advantages of an opaque object, it is shadows formed by opaque objects provide people with shade or shelter. Even your house where you stay. Yes, you stay in a house which is an opaque object, so it provides shelter for you to be comfortable. Let's look at the next one. It says opaque walls prevent people outside a house from seeing those inside the house. This also provides privacy for you. So you need privacy in your house? Yes, the opaque object will help you. The house is an opaque object. The walls are opaque. The doors are opaque. So what happens? They provide privacy for you inside the house. So those are some of the advantages of opaque objects. Let's look at shadows. What are shadows? A shadow is a region of darkness caused by obstruction of light by an opaque object. I come again. A shadow is a region of darkness caused by obstruction of light by an opaque object. So when light is obstructed, it forms a shadow. So that region of darkness is what we are referring to as a shadow. So a shadow has two regions, namely the umbra and secondly the penumbra. These are the two regions of a shadow. So the umbra is the dark shadow and the penumbra is the partially light shadow. We shall look at this in detail. Let's go on. The lighter outer part of a shadow is called penumbra. The lighter outer part of a shadow is called penumbra. Let's look at this diagram here. This is the sun, which is the source of light. We have the earth here, which is the opaque object. Then when rays move from the sun and come and strike the earth, a shadow will be formed this side of the earth. So you can realize that what is formed this way as a shadow, we shall have the umbra and we shall have also the penumbra. The umbra is the dark shadow, and the penumbra, like you see here, this is the light shadow or the lighter part of the shadow. So when a shadow is cast, it has got the darker part and the lighter part. So the dark part of the shadow is what we are referring to as the umbra, and the lighter part of the shadow is what we are referring to as the penumbra. So the penumbra is the lighter part of the shadow, and the umbra is the thick dark part of the shadow. So this statement says the darker inner part of the shadow is called the umbra, like you can see here. The inner darker part of the shadow is the umbra. I think you can look at this color. It is darker than this one here. Altogether, compare this to this. This is more darker than this. So this penumbra is lighter, and the umbra is darker. Altogether, this is lighter than this. So that is the difference between penumbra and the umbra. They are all shadows, but penumbra is lighter, umbra is darker. Let's go on and look at characteristics of shadows. One of the characteristics of shadows is here. Shadows have the same shape as the object. Just take an example of this picture here of this woman here. This is her shadow. but you can see that the shadow, the image of this shadow looks like the woman herself altogether. So shadows have the same shape. Shadows have the same shape like the real object. Let's go on. When the source of light is big, when a source of light is big, a turtle shadow called umbra surrounded by half or partial shadow called umbra is formed. So when you look at this diagram, when a source of light is big, like you can see the source of light here, the sun is big enough. Together, when the sun is big enough, or when the source of light, take an example of maybe a torch or maybe a lantern. So one of the other characteristics of shadows is when the source of light is big altogether, a total shadow called umbra altogether, a total shadow called what? Umbra, surrounded this side and this side. The umbra is surrounded by the penumbra this side and the penumbra this side altogether, which is the partial shadow. It is formed altogether. So when the source of light is big, the umbra is formed with penumbras on either sides altogether. Okay, then let's go on. When the source of light is small, when the source of light is small altogether, a sharp complete shadow is formed called a total shadow or umbra. Let's go on. Note, a shadow is the same shape as the obstacle or object formed on it. So they look similar, they look the same. The size of the shadow depends on the size of the source of light. When the source of light is small, the shadow is also small altogether. Then a small obstacle with a small source of light forms a sharp dark shadow that is larger than that obstacle. I come again. A small obstacle with a small source of light forms a sharp dark shadow that is larger than that obstacle. A shadow has two regions, the umbra and the penumbra. When the object is far from the screen, a dark patch called umbra surrounded by a lighter ring called the penumbra is formed. Then when the object is very close to the screen, only the umbra patch is formed. These are characteristics of shadows. When the object is very close to the screen, only the umbra patch is formed. Then let's look at the eclipse. What is an eclipse? An eclipse is a natural shadow formed when the sun light is obstructed by another planet, i.e. the moon or earth. So when the moon or the earth obstructs light rays from the sun, it forms what we call an eclipse altogether. So when you are asked what is an eclipse is a natural shadow formed when the sun's light is obstructed by another planet. What are those other planets we are talking about? It can be a moon or it can be the earth. Then the word eclipse means cut off light. Yes, the word eclipse alone means cut off light. Let's go on. The sun, the moon, and the earth are the planets that are involved in the eclipse. Just like you can see here, we have the sun, we have the earth here, and we have the moon right here. So these three are the ones that are always involved in the eclipse altogether. Let's go on and look at this activity. What are incandescent objects? Do you still remember the definition? Try out this number. We have already discussed what incandescent objects are. Number 2, what is a beam of light? Number 3, what are opaque objects? Number 4, write down any two objects that are opaque. Number 5, state two advantages of opaque objects. Number 6, what are opaque objects? Number Number 7, what name is given to the total shadow formed when light is obstructed? Name the main natural source of light. Why do we see lightning before we hear thunder? Then number 10, write down any one use of shadows to man. So ladies and gentlemen, Blakey and Molly, please try out these numbers. I looked at your live worksheets, but I observed you people, you didn't really look through you didn't watch the videos I posted. Please make sure you watch the videos carefully. You can always replay them, or you can even download them on your PC, so that you can always play them and really you master this content. Otherwise, I also instructed you to make corrections for the work or the activity I gave you. I've also given you corrections in this very video. Please watch this video and rewatch it again in order for you to understand properly. I wish you well. Bye bye.